Hey everybody, Shane here. Welcome to week 2 of the spring 2021 semester. We are now going to start getting into the music. So last week was really orientation. It was time to get everybody onto the same playing field, as it were, in terms of online education, although obviously with COVID, it's much more common that everybody's used to that now. But still, sometimes a lot of folks got thrown into online education without really understanding much about it. So you got that. You got to learn about the class, the expectations of the class, and then you also got to learn about nostalgia and the role that it plays in our favorite music, and why we like what we like, and maybe even in some ways why we don't like what we don't like, and all of those things. So now we're going to start getting into the music. And remember that this is a history class. This is the history of rock and roll. And so rock and roll, just so that you understand this, really only existed for about 5 years in the second half of the 50s. So where did it come from and what happens after that? So there's all these different things that are going to come together to get us to rock and roll proper and the role of that. And then after that, what happens, and I'll start using the term rock more than rock and roll. I did have a student once that said, oh, this is really more of a pop class than a rock class. You're getting into sort of gray details. Pop is just short for popular. That's why I moved from, and pop fits within all of this. There's really, I'm not going to go into this whole lecture, but there's 4 kinds of music out there. There's cultural and ritual music, which exists in all cultures and is usually connected to some other type of event, such as a funeral, military, birth, weddings, all that sort of stuff. There is folk music that exists in most cultures, which sometimes overlaps with cultural ritual. But in addition to cultural ritual, it can also serve as social functions. So, you got fiddle music for square dancing, all of that. That also overlaps with this. And so a lot of the music that we're going to learn about is very much connected to folk music. In fact, blues is a folk music. There is art music, which is, you may be familiar more with the term classical music, which not all cultures have. And then there is popular music. And popular music is sort of what we're studying. And it is generally made to entertain and to make money. And so that's really what we're looking at. There are things that overlap with all of these, but those are the 4 main types of music. We're really mostly focused on popular music and then where it intersects with the other styles of music. So you now get to understand the rhythm of how the class works. There was a little bit of confusion with some folks because I posted the Welcome to Week 1 video in the announcement, and then I also posted it in the first part of the module, and so some people are a little confused about how to reply. From here on out, these videos only show up in the announcements. So you need to reply to the announcement with whatever question I give you. So somewhere in this video, I'm going to give you a question. You're going to post a reply. And you just reply to this announcement. You will see an assignment that says video announcement reply. That's just for me to keep track of grades. It's not anything you need to submit there. That's just where I put that in, and so that it shows up in your grade book. You will have a discussion every week. You will have a reflection observation every week. You will have a quiz for each chapter. So some weeks, like this coming week, you will have 2 quizzes. Most of them you'll just have the 1, and then there are the 3 big tests that will show up throughout the class. So one thing that's going to happen with the discussions, now that we've had everybody, is that we did the meet and greet, and I've been reviewing those, and we'll kind of read through it more and get to know you. We're now going to divide the class into 3 discussion groups. This is hopefully just so that things will be a little more engaging and not get lost. You will not be able to see other people's posts until you post. So think about what you want to write. Just so that you know, the materials in the discussions and the reflection observations or the questions are based upon the materials. So every Monday, the modules open. Every Tuesday, the assignments open. By Thursday, you need to get your initial discussion post in. That gives you a little time to get through the material and think about it. If you don't get it in by Thursday, you can still put it in. You'll just get docked a little bit in points. Then you have till Sunday to reply to 2 other posts and get the rest of your work done. I do this so that we try to keep some rhythm and some momentum to the class. But the discussion and reflection observation topics are based on the materials that you're learning. So it is important that you go through the materials before you do that. You also, some of you reached out to me and said, hey, I can't get into this thing or that thing. It's because you didn't go through the materials first. So that's the way this whole thing works. I've been doing this for quite a while now, and it's a good way of doing it. It's a good rhythm. It gives some flexibility, but it helps keep you all on tack. So make sure that you're going through the materials before you jump into it, and that you're going through the book. So whenever I say materials, I mean the chapters in the textbook, and I mean the online materials. They support each other, okay? So you got 2 chapters this week. We're going to start off by going with the foundations of sort of where did American music come from. This could really be a class in and of itself, but I know a lot of you, don't want to get down into this kind of fine detail. But, our music exists, popular music exists because of the result of the slave trade and the sort of I don't know how do you say it, the sort of impact of African culture and Western culture into each other in the 16 and 1700s. The slave trade, you can study it. I don't go into a lot of detail. You can spend time, you can dig into it. Most of the slaves that were stolen from Africa were taken across to South America. The majority of the slaves went to Brazil, but then there was a whole slave up through the Caribbean into the United States. So that's why you'll see the impact of things like in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. You'll see them in Jamaica. You'll see them in Cuba. And then we get here to, Florida and to the American South. And that's, you can sort of see why the geography worked that way. So what you had was these folks, that were in this horrible situation, ripped from their homeland, sold and brought to work. And whether they were in South America, in the islands in the Caribbean, or in America, they came in contact with the other musical styles and they influenced each other. So when we think about Latin jazz, we can't separate the influence of the rhythms from Africa. When we think about even music into Mexico, Son Jarocho from Veracruz was very much influenced from African music. Of course, the music coming up through Cuba and Jamaica and all of that, the same, and even here. And so what you have in kind of a simplified way is you have the harmonies, the melodies of Western music combining with rhythmic activities of African music as these cultures blended together, sometimes forced to be blended together. And so they influenced each other and started to create this music. Many of these Africans, or most of them, were not allowed to speak their native languages. They were not allowed to participate in music and dance of their own culture. Eventually that changed. If you're interested in that, you can study about Congo Square in New Orleans, where once a week they could get together. This was for a while, and sort of express themselves authentically. Many of them were forced to go to church, and they were hearing the music from the hymns, and all these things started to blend together. And the whole history of popular music is about cultures blending together. We live in a very interesting time right now because we are wanting to sort of divide cultures. You may have heard the term tribalism and sort of the move back to that. But many things in the world are for the blendings of cultures. Sometimes those come from good circumstances. Sometimes they come from bad circumstances. So all of that relates to this. So you're going to learn a little bit about minstrel shows, which is where a lot of the roots of American popular music came from, and it was very racist. There's a video on that in the materials. So just be forewarned. This is part of the history. This is part of the reality, and so it's important that we understand these. Sometimes we run in a risk of, if we want to sort of whitewash or sideline history, there's that famous saying that those that don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. It's important to understand where we are today, but then move from today forward into a better way. And I think that we've seen a lot of that, and you're going to see the role of race throughout popular music all the way up through till today. It sort of ebbs and flows, but it becomes a very big deal. And so you need to be aware of that. So you're going to learn about Stephen Foster, who wrote Oh Susanna. You're going to learn about jazz, ragtime, Tin Pan Alley. Take the time to read the materials and to study the stuff in the book, in the modules. It's important, and you'll be quizzed and have to write about it. You are going to learn about blues, about the origin of the blues, at least as far as we know. The blues are an oral tradition, A-U-R-A-L, meaning that they were not written down. And so it also was an oral tradition, O-R-A-L, in that they were passed from person to person. And so, it wasn't really until recordings came along that we started to be more aware of it. So we don't necessarily know when the blues actually started, but we do know that they were an important style that not just on their own, but moved into influence jazz and, of course, popular music. And so we're going to be talking about that all the way through. You're going to learn about the different types of blues: country blues, Delta blues, classic blues. And then in chapter 2, you're going to learn as those populations moved north into the cities to follow the work. You're going to learn about urban blues. You're going to learn about chess records. You're going to learn about sort of the rhythm and blues, which is where you have these dance rhythms, African rhythms that would combine with blues chord progressions and blues harmonies and form a particular style of music. And ultimately, rhythm and blues becomes rock and roll. It just takes a little while to get there. So a couple things that I need to get out there. I try not to normally make these videos more than 10 minutes long. It is setting up the week, so it's important. But some of this is just sort of getting you on the right page. Okay, so a couple things to keep in mind. Up until recordings, which started to show up in the late 1800s, but really became popular in the early 20th century, 1910s, 1920s, all music was live. You either played it or you heard somebody that was playing it. It wasn't until we had recordings and radio, they would broadcast live music, they would broadcast radio programs, and that would be live, and that's how a lot of people would hear it. Now, radio up until the 1960s, whenever I'm talking about radio, it's always AM radio. There is no FM radio that to speak of until we get to the second half of the 1960s. And the thing about AM radio that you need to know, and you can always look this up too, but I won't go into a lot of detail, is that AM radio, depending on whether it was transmitted during the day or the night, was transmitted differently. It was more terrestrial during the day, more earthbound. At night, it was more up into the atmosphere. So AM radio could travel states away, and that's how a lot of music was transmitted and traveled. Then, of course, we get to recordings. In the early days of recordings, it was wax cylinders, and then it became vinyl, which is made from shellac, not vinyl, but shellac, which comes from beetles, not the band The Beatles, but the bug beetles. And so there's this whole thing about how music was transmitted, and then, of course, where you had access. And race, again, plays a very big role because you had black clubs and you had white clubs. It was possible to have a white club and have a black artist performing, although they probably couldn't stay there or whatever, but you almost never had a black club with a white artist performing. And the audiences were segregated. And this segregation issue stays an issue for a while. So I need you to be, mindful of that. We'll talk about the role of the radio when the transistor radio comes along in the 40s and the 50s, and then LPs and 45s. Those will show up in the late 40s is when they're going to show up. So we'll talk a little bit more down the line as we get to that. This is just really getting the foundation. So I want to set the context of the class before you get into the materials. I'm not going to video the lecture because you have the materials, but I'm going to set the parameters. If you have questions about this or anything else, reach out to me, but make sure that you've gone through everything and that you understand it. So, okay, I think that that's good. I think that that sets us up for today. I mentioned urban blues, Chicago blues, rhythm and blues, country blues, Delta blues, the early music, Tin Pan Alley. So all of those, you're going to learn about what that is. Ragtime, Scott Joplin, Stephen Foster. So take your time, go through the materials, make sure that you understand it. When you do your quizzes, you got one shot at it. So make sure that you've gone through it. Make sure that you're going through the course materials. And for now, maybe later on, I'm going to throw out, sort of more material related questions. But for now, I think, what did we do? We did a coffee drink before. Okay, who has the best hamburger? That's what I'm going to put out there. Or veggie burger, or whatever it is that you eat. So, is it In-N-Out? Is it McDonald's? It's probably not McDonald's. Is it, Burger King? Is it Five Guys? Is it the place around the corner? Who makes the best burger or veggie burger? And where do you get it from? So that's it. Reply to this announcement, and then I do the grades afterwards. That's it for now. Have a great day. Have a great week. And keep an eye out for that Thursday morning reminder. And we'll talk soon. Take care. Bye.